Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, the Tubs of the Club, your University of Idaho affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brian Marceau. It's a solo venture tonight, guys. Dallas is out of town. Martin, look, if you're watching live, it's 3 minutes from midnight. So this is when I can make the stuff work, guys. James T, at least there's only 16 days till hoops. Yeah, I'm going to lean on that comment section as much as I have to tonight. Anyway, guys, we have a rough one tonight. Idaho falls 21-14 at Eastern Washington in what has to be the ugliest, roughest day in Vandal football since the big bad Paul Petrino days, guys. That there's no other way to talk about this game. I actually think we learned a ton about Idaho this game. That's why I'm going now. And hey, just to clear my throat a little bit, we all know the reaction videos are they're not always 100% accurate, but I think they're an accurate representation of fans' experience of what's going on right now, which is why I wanted to go now. Otherwise, not that you guys give a shit, but I essentially can't go tomorrow. And with my schedule right now, with school as well as, family stuff, I'm honestly not going to be able to record probably until Thursday. And I don't want to wait to talk about this game until Thursday because I think there's some stuff you can lose in that time. Between now and look, Idaho's got Portland State this week. I'm still going to call Portland State top 5 Portland State, but I don't know who Idaho can joke about right now. That's just the way it's been. So, God ripped the Band-Aid off though. There's a lot I think to cover, and Dallas and Martin can give a little bit more on the Thursday show about how they feel, but I really want to get something out now, so that's what we're doing. Before we go to cover the game. The show sponsored by Snake River Stampede Canadian Whisky, Around the Bar, brought to us by Hughes River Expedition. And look, if you are looking for a great all-inclusive vacation, do not look past your backyard. Hughes River has been Vandal-owned and operated since 1976 and are ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River no return, the Salmon River Canyon, or the Selway, and check out special trips like the one to see the Perseid Meteor Shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails. By the way, that all sounds great compared to football season right now. Spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the country. You just bring clothes, let HRE handle the rest. Give Colin a call right now, 406-540-4450. Check them out at HughesRiver.com. It's midnight, guys. There's going to be a couple of rough spots, so just bear with me. So this game, now I think the biggest takeaway, if we're run a little bit through the blow by blow, is neither Idaho or Eastern are good teams. I don't think if you're a Vandal, if Idaho had somehow held on to win to beat Eastern today, I don't think anyone should feel good about the game today. And a loss, obviously, you feel a little bit worse because you didn't pick up the W and get a first Big Sky win for head coach Thomas Ford. But phase one, these were two not very good teams, with Idaho playing without Joshua Wood at quarterback. And I just think it's clear Joshua Wood means the world to this University of Idaho offense. And we'll get into it. So the game itself, when I say it was ugly, this game started off with back-to-back-to-back turnover on downs by Idaho, Eastern, then Idaho. This is a game where Eastern gets the first score, the 31-yard field goal with 4 minutes left in the first quarter. Idaho strikes back with a 26-yard touchdown pass from Jack Wagner to Marquand McCraney, one of the only bright spots on this University of Idaho offense today. Makes it 7-3, right? The Vandals do not score until 2 minutes, 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter. 40-yard touchdown pass to Michael Graves from Nick Joseph. You just heard that I brought up two quarterbacks who played. Obviously, Joshua Wood did not due to injury. We also saw Rocco Koch throw some passes as well. So Idaho played 3 separate quarterbacks as far as giving attempts. Idaho did absolutely everything they could to try to make something stick offensively, and the Vandals come away with 14 points. Now, hard to even think about what went well in a game where Idaho loses to, look, Eastern Washington been giving up around 500 yards a game this season. And University of Idaho today, like their total output offensively was 338. Now, that might sound terrible, But hey, what went well? There are a few things that went well. As bad as Idaho played defensively last week, at the very least, Idaho with a better matchup for sure on the defensive side of the ball, Idaho did play solid defense. And you might say, like, okay, well, if you said this was an ugly game, how is that possible? Eastern Washington punted. I gotta verify this number real quick because I got the number completely threw me off. Eastern punted 7 times today. Idaho punted 5. There were 12 punts in this game. Idaho's defense did their very best while getting no help for almost the entire game offensively to keep this game competitive. So there's not a whole lot I'm going to be able to talk about tonight that went well, but we can say defensively, Idaho did show up in a way that was much better than last week. Nate Bell, quarterback for Eastern, goes 18, and Nate Bell is the entire offense for Eastern. He rushed it 23 times for 134 yards. He threw it 31 times for 177 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he did throw a pick as well. I just covered Eastern legitimately had about 16 total yards on the game that did not come from Nate Bell rushing or Nate Bell throwing. That's it. He was the entire offense. But Idaho defensively, we had probably our best outing from the secondary in a long time. Now, to be fair, Nate Bell is probably the worst quarterback to pick apart a defense that Idaho is going to play other than Portland State next week. But we had 2 pass breakups from Caleb Ricks, a pass breakup from Isaiah King, a pass breakup from Zach Krotzer, and Jamel Bledman picked off a pass. So we actually did get some work in the secondary that Idaho just had not seen for a long time. So want to acknowledge that effort, and also to say that the front seven, look, hey, they obviously didn't sack Nate Bell, or sorry, they were not able to pressure Nate Bell that much in the passing game. And Nate Bell did rush it 23 times, 434 yards, 54 of those came on 1 rush. But for a ton of this game, defensively, Idaho did enough to make this competitive. And I say that because getting no help offensively, Eastern didn't look. This was a 13-7 game at the half. We got to talk about how it got 13-7 at the half because that's a big deal. But Idaho pitched a shutout in the third quarter. Eastern picked up their final score with about a minute into the fourth quarter off a 6-yard touchdown pass from Nate Bell to Miles Williams, and that was it. 21 points. So legitimately, Idaho held Eastern to 8 points in the second half, and it wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough, which is astounding to say. So there's a lot we're going to talk about negatively about this game for sure, but do have to acknowledge that Idaho defensively, if you give up 21 points, you should win that game just about every single time. And this is the second time that Idaho's had a strong defensive outing on the season, and the offense just completely no-shows. I mean, this is no different team, of course. This is no different than the Washington State game week 1 of Idaho held WSU to 13 points. You have to win games if you hold the other team to 13 points, and that didn't happen. Well, hey, this game, you pitch a shutout in the second half, you hold a team to 8 points in the second half, 21 on the game. You have to win that game. You just have to, and that's not what happened. So a ton to get to on the offensive side in the second half of the show, and some just baffling coaching stuff too, guys. Just have to. A couple other things that did go well. Marquand McCraney is looking like he's kind of taking a step as a receiver. 7 catches, 105 yards, and 1 touchdown. Michael Graves had a touchdown catch too. But Marquand McCraney, he was really, really highly touted coming into Idaho, and hadn't really found a role. He in the depth chart, he was listed above Emerson Cortez Menjivar, which I don't even remember if ECM played today. Full disclosure, this was a very rough game to follow that way. But yeah, had no catches. But Marquand McCraney looked very good, looking like a guy who might be able to be a version of a difference maker if he stays at Idaho and is able to get more reps. So yeah, that's kind of it offensively. we have to get to the other half of the show. There is a lot to talk about because this is, I guess I'll get to my broad takeaways after talk about, and it'll happen while we're talking about things that did not go well. But legitimately, that's like it. Idaho defensively did fight. They got very little help offensively. They got shitty field position a ton of the time, and still just gave up 21 total points. I talked last week about how the defense for Idaho most of the season has seemed ready to roll over. That's not what happened today. The Idaho played about as well as they've played defensively the entire season. It just, they didn't get enough help. That's it. Just didn't get enough. Okay. So before we talk about the other half of the show, I just want to talk about Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. Might be a great thing for you guys to reach and grab right now. There's two options from Snake River, either their entry-level Stampede or their small batch 1915. That's aged an extra 2 years. Both are 3-grain whiskeys, 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. Both have double barrel finishes. Both are fantastic buys economically at $26 for the Stampede, $39 for the 1915 at Idaho State liquor stores. They're the top 2 Canadian whiskeys I believe you're going to get in the state of Idaho. So if you have not tried one yet, grab yourself a Snake River today. Today, probably listening to in the morning. Okay, we got to talk about what did not go well. A lot, guys, a lot. I do believe we learned a ton, but a lot did not go well today. So the first one, let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Idaho is without Joshua Wood. This Idaho Vandals team is 100% lost offensively. I could go an hour talking about this. We'll see how long we do. So the Vandals scored 2 touchdowns, had another missed field goal from Owen Adams. That was not the difference maker in the game, but the Vandals played 3 different quarterbacks today, as is in allowed pass attempts. Now, I just got to say, as we see more and more of the season, more and more of decisions previously start to make sense, right? I've talked about this a few times, especially in the hashtag Only Tubs Discord, patreon.com/Tubs at the Club Sports Show, and take part in the best online chat covering University of Idaho athletics that you can possibly come across. I talked about that extensively in our Discord about when you look at how Jack Wagner's play calling was in 2024. A lot of people, sometimes people on our show, complained about the play calling for Wagner. And now, as we've seen more and more of what Wagner can do, we understand, no, Luke Schleisner had him thrown to the sideline because that way the mistakes were not terminal. And there was just no way to have long drives with Wagner's quarterback that year. And that has not changed this year. But I just bring that up to say, I've talked about all 3 quarterbacks. Rocco Koch is one of them, and it's not fantastic. Not to put down the dude, but the news on Rocco is not fantastic. So phase 1, Jack Wagner starts, goes 8 of 12, 87 yards, a touchdown, a pick, and a lost fumble. Now, his lost fumble, part of that is on Matt Linehan and Thomas Ford. But part of that is Wagner has played 2 games and it's just been a turnover machine for Idaho. He got pulled at the end of the first half. And I don't think anyone can argue that. So the pick Wagner threw, again, back-breaking, again, terrible, right middle of the field, right to the linebacker. The touchdown pass that Wagner threw to McCraney looks great, but he makes too many terminal mistakes. That's just it. And look, he's a backup, so a lot of people listening to the show get really touchy when we accurately describe Jack Wagner's play. But he got pulled in the second half, at the end of the first half, because he takes too many sacks. There's too many mistakes, and there's not enough of the good stuff going on. Okay, like that's it. Just Idaho's not going to win game. This version of Idaho, I know people like to talk about Idaho winning 6 games while Wagner started in 2024. This version of Idaho's winning no games with Jack Wagner. Like there's just too many mistakes. And this what Idaho has offensively, there's far too little margin for error to be able to have that happen. So phase 1, we did get a little bit of Rocco Koch as well. And on the ground, especially in the first half, Rocco Koch was solid. 14 carries for 81 yards, very similar output overall to what we saw last week against Northern Colorado. No touchdowns from Koch, but now we're in the bad half of the show, right? So what was the bad half with Koch? On this show, in the stands, I have heard many people in the comment section, our Only Tubs Discord, and also, hey, maybe us too, saying, why Linehan, Ford, why aren't you letting Rocco Koch throw the ball once in a while just to let the defense feel like there's a chance? And we found out why. Rocco Koch in the second half got his chance to be the undisputed starter, or not a starter. Well, yeah, he was a starter second half. He got some extended run. And Rocco cannot pass. Not a put down to the dude. He's a super hard worker, great rusher. But honestly, when Linehan was not calling pass plays for Rocco Koch, that probably made Rocco Koch appear more dangerous to the other team, because if you don't see him throw, there's still the idea that he's a quarterback. He's got to be able to throw, right? Koch was 0 of 6 in this game. Most of his misses were pretty bad. Bad enough that I 100% understand why Rocco Koch was not allowed to pass whatsoever prior to this game. And, the second half, Koch didn't get to rush it as much, but as Eastern was not scared about Koch not throwing the ball, started to stack the box, and Koch became a little bit less effective. And I got to say, this was actually kind of devastating, I think, for a lot of fans, because Rocco Koch is most certainly a fan favorite in some ways. Super easy dude to root for. Clearly an energetic, interesting guy, charismatic guy, but he can't throw. Absolutely cannot throw. So if with Joshua Wood out, I just covered 2 quarterbacks who can't play and pass, and other teams are now going to see, because Idaho did what we've all hoped they would do, is give him at least a chance. Now all coaches have seen Koch can't throw. They didn't let him throw earlier because he couldn't. So eventually Nick Josephek came in. So that's 3 different guys who essentially got starters reps this game. And before I talk about what Josephek did, I do need to acknowledge something. This is I think fans need to be okay with the fact that at least the coaching staff was acknowledging none of these guys are working, so they were willing to try something else. I'm completely okay with that. I'm also okay with the takeaway that, look, no one understood how much Joshua Wood meant to this team and how much better this team is when Joshua Wood is under center. I always believed he was going to be good, but I didn't realize that it was a canyon between Joshua Wood and whoever else was up. But I say that because at the end of spring football, it was pretty damn obvious that Nick Josephek was QB1 before Joshua Wood came over. Now, I'm not at practice every day, but with Sawyer Teeney out with injury, Wagner being tabbed as the starter, and then Koch being brought in as a potential starter today above Josephek, the only implication here is that between the spring and today, something happened in practice with Josephek where Ford and Linehan lost the confidence they had in him during the spring. So I'm just saying that to say, if for them to go to the point of going back to Josephek, who we've seen do better than Wagner. Hey, Crew had 76-38 saying we all knew Josephek was better than Wagner last year. Look, man, I agree with that. But at the same time, if he dropped that far in the depth chart, I don't have Coach Ford here, but I don't have Coach Linehan here. But for that to be the case, I have got to expect that what they saw in practice was regression. But at least, hey, they gave Josephek a shot. Josephek came into the game, did engineer a touchdown, went 6 of 13 for 104 yards. He passed exactly, and by the way, rushed for 21 yards on 3 carries. Josephek passed exactly like we'd seen him do previously. Is he a great deep threat? Absolutely not. Can he hit intermediate short passes? Yes. Can he extend plays a teeny bit? Yes. Honestly, the Idaho offense that you would run with Josephek is much closer to the strength of Joshua Wood than what Jack Wagner can do. No idea about Sawyer Teeney because I haven't seen the dude play and he's hurt, so we're not going to see him play for a while. But I have to say, I hope that means that Josephek just bounced up to QB2 because he at least acquitted himself much better than maybe we would have thought. He wasn't turning the ball over. Idaho did have drives with him, but the benchmark here is because Idaho got nothing out of the quarterback position for so long. We had 3 different guys play. And the only takeaway I have for that is everyone who was questioning Joshua Wood at all as being named a starter as quickly as he was, and anyone who is questioning Joshua Wood as a starter throughout the season, has got to be accepting of the fact that, oh man, no, Joshua Wood's miles ahead of anywhere else we have. So, man. Now, I'm saying all that, I got to talk about the running back room because this was another thing. Like, virtually everything offensively did not go well today, guys. There was almost no support out of the running backs. Absolutely none. And Eastern Washington, they're better against the rush than they are against the pass, but they're not great against the rush. Eli Cummings, 8 rushes, 10 yards. Nate Thomas, 5 rushes, 16 yards. Hayden Kinchlow just had 1 rush for 5 yards. And I did bring up that Rocco Koch had 81 yards, but a lot of it came kind of early. And later on, as Eastern was starting to stack the box, Idaho was not able to run. And here's the problem. If you cannot pass against Eastern, you can't pass against anyone. And that was the case for Jack Wagner and Rocco Koch. Eastern is probably the worst. If either Eastern or Portland State will be the worst pass defense that Idaho sees the entire year. And Wagner and Koch could not do it against Eastern through the air. They're probably the first 2 quarterbacks this entire season to be able to say that, guys. Not a put down to them. This is a reality. We talked about this with Kyler. I've talked about it on my Sunday show. Eastern has one of the worst pass defenses in the entire Big Sky. If you can't pass against them, you can't pass against anyone. And this is what happened for Idaho is Eastern essentially was daring Idaho to pass the ball, and they couldn't, which is why the Vandals finished with 14 points. Maybe if Nick Josephat had played more of this game, things are different. But this is the part where I think we got to be fair to the coaching staff, and I'll be critical of stuff in a second. But just as quarterback position, look, there's actually been a lot of mobility at the quarterback 2 through 4 throughout this season. And I don't think there's any feedback you can take out of that. There being this much mobility at spots 2 through 4 throughout the season, other than to say none of them has been showing enough in practice to stand out. I hope that this means Nick Josephat is really has this down as being QB2. I really hope Joshua Wood is back because that's the key for this Vandal team. But there's Idaho couldn't pass against the worst passing defense they've seen the entire year, guys. That's it. That's part of why Idaho was not able to do anything offensively for almost all of this game. The Vandals held Eastern to just over 300 total yards in this game, and that allowed 8 points in the second half, and they lost. Talking about one of the ugliest games I've ever seen. So now a couple other things to get to. Thomas Ford and Matt Linehan, I didn't get to listen to the post game. I think they've got to answer, or they at least need to change strategies on how they finish second halves, guys. I just think they have to, finish second quarters to close the first half. So Idaho is up 7-6 with about a minute-ish left, under 2 minutes, a little over a minute, deep in Eastern territory. And instead of trying to kneel it out and go to half saying, hey, this was an ugly as hell half, Idaho had every reason to be down, but they're up 7-6. Instead of taking, just trying to run out the clock, let Eastern take the ball in the second half, Idaho tried to advance. Of course, that meant passing the ball. Wagner couldn't do it. So Idaho ends up punting. Eastern scores a touchdown. They're up 13-6, 13-7. Idaho gets the ball back. They do advance into field goal range. With 6 seconds left, instead of kicking the field goal, Idaho tries to go for one more play. Wagner gets hit while he's getting ready to throw. It's ruled a fumble, half over, opportunity to score over. That's probably the last we see of Wagner the entire season. But I bring that scenario up because this is the second time in 2 games that Idaho could have just said, hey, we're okay where we're at. Let's just stop the bleeding, get to halftime. Happened against Northern Colorado too. And that was a 10-point swing between Eastern getting a score and had Idaho been able to make that field goal, which, maybe they do, maybe they don't. It was from the left hash, which is a more favorable place for Idaho's kickers. Either way, that 10-point swing was monumental because, look, Eastern got a touchdown out of that. Without that touchdown, we're talking about a game that's essentially OT-ish, or, it's Idaho's in a much better position, and just with how Idaho could not move the ball, points are at a premium. And I understand maybe you're trying to test Eastern secondary, but I don't know how much more evidence you have to have with the backups in so far, other than maybe Josephat. He did show something in the second half, but keep in mind Josephat's completion percentage is still under 50. So we're not lighting the world on fire, but better. just astounding. That to me was a clearly a huge coaching mistake. I really hope Linehan and Ford, whoever made the call there, really hope they're going to reevaluate that, especially with your backup quarterback. That look, with the backup quarterback, there's no team that Idaho can probably blow out. I just don't think there is, unless something happens to change with Joseph Eck for this 1 week. But we all have to hope Joshua Wood is back, because it's Idaho's sitting at 2-5. This is as bad as it could possibly have been. Now, do want to acknowledge that a lot of most quarterbacks on staff were recruited during the Eck time, and these are guys that a lot of us were happy came back. But it's clear that Joshua Wood is the answer starter for Idaho. We'll worry about next season when we get there. But there's clearly just an ocean of difference between QB1 and QB2, which is not the case for a lot of teams. Eastern, Nate Bell, he's the number 2 quarterback for Eastern. Gibson for Northern Colorado last week, he was the number 2 quarterback for Northern Colorado heading into the season. So there are teams who have more depth. That's just one of the many positions that Idaho's going to have to reevaluate when we get into next season. And that's why I believe Idaho has to look at this last 5 games of the year as it's a 5-game tryout for coaches. It's a 5-game tryout for players about who's going to be back next year. And look, I'm going to get to broad takeaways. Hey, player of the game is quite obviously on offense, Marquand McCraney to me, and defensively, there actually were quite a few good showings. I'm going to go with Caleb Ricks because of 2 huge pass breakups that were part of what kept this game close the way it was. Those 2 guys are my player of the game. So players of the game brought to us by vandalgear.com. So, vandalgear.com, the company is Pacific Custom Sportswear, run out of Spokane, Washington, just been running the place for 25 years. And it's the best place to go for Idaho apparel. You get your Fighting Potatoes shirt, your Home Sweet Dome shirt. You got your Idaho script shirt. We got the Grumpy Joe with Pride Gold and the gray strap across the chest. It's the best place to get Vandal shirts. They're very favorably priced too, man. Way better than where you're going to get elsewhere. I bring all this up because not only is this the best place to get your Vandal shirts, but if you're a company, you're an org, you're a school, you're doing a fundraiser, you have merch you want to sell on your own, get a hold of Jeff. He can work with your own logo. He can help you make a logo. He can help you with sweatshirts, hoodies, long sleeves, t-shirts, whatever you want. Get a hold of Jeff. He can do it. Vandalgear.com, the company's Pacific Custom Sportswear. So now my takeaways. I'll try to hit the comment section. And guys, hey, for those who are here, thank you. We still got 13 live listeners at after midnight, man. So let me scroll through here. James TA is saying Deuce made up for last week a lot tonight. And he did. He had some plays. He got beat on a touchdown too. But it was better. Yeah, you're right. The Idaho's defensive effort is not what lost the Vandals the game tonight. You give up 21 points, you got to be able to win that game. We have no limit JO3. I gotta say, I feel for you guys, but if the Grizzlies were 2-5 right now, would there be dancing in the streets of Moscow? Hope the rest of the season goes a little better for y'all. Not really. I mean, I'll answer your question, dude. I don't root for teams to suck in the Big Sky other than Sac State this year. I root for teams to be interesting and fun. Generally speaking, what I think we need in the Big Sky is we want the traditional power schools to be good, or as many of them as possible, and we want as many of the lower schools to be interesting. So no, would I be celebrating the Grizzly in 2-5? I wouldn't, but I might be different. We have Crewhead 76. This is one of the most inept coaching jobs by an OC and HC in a while. I'll get to that. And hey, Crewhead says Joseph Eck goes in earlier, good chance we win. But I think there's reason we didn't see Joseph Eck, just like there was reason we saw Rocco Koch never got to throw the ball. And that's honestly, I think that's going to radically change how teams approach it when Koch's out there, because now that you're going to get a stacked box and have teams just say, if you can throw it at all, do it, man. We saw you throwing bounce passes across the middle. Again, not a put down to Rocco Koch, but we understand why he does not throw the ball. Yeah. And Crewhead 76, we don't have the ponies to cover up how limited Wagner is. Linehan was not ready to be an OC. That's what I got to get here. The staff better spend the rest of the season getting these kids better. Linehan, Dennison are on notice. Ford better make changes at the end of the season if there isn't some improvement. I guess that's where I'm going to talk about is there's no good takeaways right now. And I think I want to preface this real quick. Tubbs at the Club is the only online and only entity that regularly covers University of Idaho. that has been willing to be overtly critical of coaches and admin. And I say that because you might not like this. And if you don't like this, that's fine. But when Pribble was in his first year, they were barely better than Zach Kloss' team. And my basic philosophy was give the dude a minute. Thomas Ford, I'm going to say the same thing. You got to give the dude a minute. Now, does that mean give the dude a minute and, hey, just hold status quo and that's okay? No, absolutely not. There's got to be some change between now and the end of the season, and absolutely heading into next season, a couple things have to change. I'm not a football genius by any means, but watching these games, I watch all of Idaho games. I'll rewatch a lot of Idaho games. What I think is, honestly, I'm more concerned about Idaho offensively than defensively. I think the answer defensively for the most part is they need to just get some better guys. Not trying to put down any guys who are contributing, and we appreciate everyone on the team putting in the effort they do. So this isn't meant to be a slight. But look, Idaho's had no pass rush the entire season, and most games, other than today, this was easily the best effort from secondary for Idaho. Not even close. It was the best effort, but most aggressive play by secondary. Most times we saw, successful pass breakup, stuff like that. If that means growth by those guys, awesome. We've only seen it happen once though. So if that repeats itself, that's a big deal. But I say all that because with Court Dennison right now, I think Ford talked about simplifying things defensively, and I think you saw that today. And I think you saw a way better result. Yes, Eastern's not a good football team, but this effort overall defensively with no help from the offense for most of this game, I thought that was one of the better efforts we've seen from this defense as a whole. And I think the problem defensively is just we don't have guys who can get to the quarterback, and we don't have enough dudes in the secondary who can man up and stay with the guy. So that's where I think the biggest issue defensively is the answer before we can be that frustrated about Dennison. That's not to say he can't get better. The biggest answer for Idaho defensively is they need better secondary, and they need a pass rush of some sort whatsoever. They simply don't have the guys to compete with Montana State. It's astonishing that they were able to be within 9-10 points of Montana in the fourth quarter. It's just lacking guys defensively. Ford's already been recruiting for an entire cycle. There's new guys going to come in. There'll be transfers that come in. So I say 5-week tryout now for guys for next season. Offensively is where I'm most worried about. And I say that because we have a solid, not a Montana State offensive line, but Idaho does have a solid offensive line. Like Jack Wagner had time. Nick Josefek had time. Rocco Koch had time as well. We just are getting Idaho the whole season, especially since Art's been down. This is maybe where Dallas and I disagree a little bit. I think Idaho's been getting nothing out of the running back position virtually the entire year, other than Art Williams. And Art Williams is out for the season, guys. So that's not going to change this year. I think I think the play calling is, honestly, maybe I'm going to sound like an idiot, a lot of the Linehan play calling reminds me a lot of watching old Paul Petrino teams, guys. And Paul Petrino's teams were certainly not good offensively. Idaho feels predictable with a lot of what they do on the ground. And I just don't think there's a single team in the Big Sky right now that is scared of Idaho running backs. And now part of the problem is, especially with Joshua Wood out, is there's no one really scared of the Idaho quarterbacks either. But the reason I say I'm more worried about Idaho offensively is phase one. If you got a good O-line, you have to be able to do something. And that Idaho they were terrible today offensively. No way around it. They scored 14 points against an Eastern Eagle team that is not strong defensively at all. You're lost. And honestly, for a lot of this season, for me, I feel like Idaho does not know who they are offensively. I feel like it's taken a lot of time for Idaho to find ways to get easy passes for guys like Joshua Wood. And then he's hurt, so obviously he's not playing now. But the mistakes, the turnovers we saw out of Wagner, honestly, he just shouldn't be throwing those passes at all. He should be doing exactly what – by the way, Matt Linehan was on staff last year. I feel that if you're going to play Wagner, you got to live with the fact that you need big plays or you're going to be punting. And that's it. So you let him throw those passes to the sideline like he had to McCraney. That was a beautiful 26-yard pass he had to McCraney. Had at least one other deep throw he connected on before the end of the first half. But Wagner can't. His mistakes in the middle of the field are game altering. And I mean, just like Ford said in the press conference at the end of the Colorado, there's some times where he holds on the ball too long, and then that's where we get our sacks. So I know that's talking about Wagner, but it's more that, one, I think the play calling for Wagner just isn't to his strengths whatsoever. But secondarily, I guess, like Crew at 76, went through the exact same pick 2 weeks. But on some of this, I think Idaho, they sprint to third down a ton. Now, part of it's because they're getting no help out of the running back room. But like today, they were getting no help out of essentially anyone because nothing was working. This was just an ugly offensive outing where it just seemed like whatever Idaho thought they could do, they were wrong. They could not make Eastern secondary pay for being the worst or second worst in the Big Sky. And then Eastern said, hey, Idaho, good luck running the ball. And that's how you get 14 points with essentially 3 played quarters between your first and second touchdown. If you look, I brought up the coordinators. Thomas Ford is going to be here for a while, guys. Now, I also think, to be fair, if you had told me in 2022, 21-22 between those 2 seasons, that Rob Orich had been hired instead of Jason Eck, where his highest position was at the FCS, highest position was as a special teams coordinator. And yes, I know Ford has some head coaching experience too, but it's D1. Hey, D1's a different level, guys. If Rob Orich had been named head coach in 2022, you probably would say, okay, like there's going to be some learning curves, and maybe there's some stuff in the first year is going to look ugly. We had a lot of belief in Thomas Ford because of how he'd been as a special teams coordinator, but I think maybe one, as a fan base, and part of this was because, look, Thomas Ford did not replace a shitty coach with a bunch of guys leaving we didn't want in the first place. Thomas Ford replaced one of the most successful coaches in the history of Idaho football, and we had reason to believe at the time that a lot of the depth pieces Idaho kept were going to be meaningful contributors right away. It turns out we were wrong about that with the players, and it turns out that though Ford was a very good special teams coordinator, he still has some stuff to learn as a play caller. You gotta hope that he's going to go back to the tape. He's going to figure some things out between now and the end of this season, and he's going to surround himself with some more experience at key positions next season because Ford's going to be here for a while, guys. And I was a guy who wanted Thomas Ford, and I still want this to work. I still believe it can work. But obviously we're going to have to see some improvement. Now, part of that is you got to get better guys. Full disclosure, Eli Cummings and Nate Thomas are going to graduate. So, and there's obviously new running back recruits coming in. That'll change. We'll see what happens with Joshua Wood at the end of the season, but there's going to be new guys that come to the program. That's going to change a bunch. But between now and the end of this season and for the start of next season, Idaho needs to figure out who the hell they are. And I feel that that's the biggest flaw you'd say right now from the new coaching staff is it just seems like the Vandals, especially on offense, have no idea who they are, especially without Joshua Wood. But even with Joshua Wood, I don't understand why there hasn't been more effort to let him get into easy positions to make things happen. Even with it talked about last week where Wagner threw more passes against Northern Colorado than Wood's thrown a single game this entire season. Now, part of that you might say is, well, a couple of the RPOs Wagner held through it. So that explains those two things. But I after watching one of the ugliest games I've ever seen as a Vandal, I just don't think I'll read Crew at 76 in the comment section, guys. I'm fine with having learning curves for coaches, but this staff looks completely inept. Dennison is inconsistent. Linehan looks worse than Axman at times. Okay. With Dennison, I truly believe part of it is just not having the guys to make what you want work, as I've brought up a few times. You have the combo of you can't get to the quarterback, but most weeks other than today, the DBs aren't hanging with receivers. What are you supposed to do if teams are gonna be able to beat you through the air one way or another, deep or pick you apart? It's going to happen. So I'm fine saying that. Obviously, there's some strategic stuff I don't 100% agree with what Dennison's done. For example, the 3-man front against San Jose State and doing a lot of 4-2-5 against UNC instead of hanging with 3 linebackers the entire time. Sometimes I think maybe he's got a little bit too aggressive or trying to be a little bit too creative, overthinking what Idaho has. But I think that a lot of that on defense is answered with they just need to get better guys. Offensively, I think the talent Idaho has, for the most part, offensively is superior to what Idaho has defensively. And I just don't think Idaho's doing enough. This is a bottom 4-ish Big Sky offense right now. It's a team who, like I said, they scored 14 against Eastern, guys. I don't think I need to explain that much further. I really think that it's astounding to me that Matt Linehan was on staff for the 3 EC years, and it appears there's a lot of concepts from the EC time that we're just not seeing. And I say that because, I'm not saying Joshua Woods, Jack Lane, but I think a lot of the concepts that Idaho ran with Jack Lane, a lot of the intermediate short pass concepts sometimes go into tempo, not always, but sometimes. I think that Joshua Wood would do just fine for doing that against most of the Big Sky. And the times Joshua Wood's gotten to play, we don't really get to see him be unleashed that much. Or look, Eastern is completely fine with Nate Bell saying, look, Nate Bell's going to create chaos, but that's how he can make things work. I don't understand why there isn't a little bit more reliance on Joshua Wood when he's played to do that. Dallas and I might differ on this if you were on the show, but I'm looking at what we've seen when Wood has played. I've seen the offensive output from Idaho. This just hasn't been a very good offensive team for most of the year, but they have at least some of the tools to be better than they are. Idaho sprints to third and long way too much. They're not getting enough out of the running backs, but they're also, I think the rush attack Idaho's been going with for the most part, especially without Art Williams, has been really predictable. And, Crew at 76, our talent depth is much worse than we thought. I think that's fair to say overall, but I also think that it's safe to say a coaching staff, and, if Thomas Ford was on the show, would probably say, yeah, we're not yet maximizing what we got. That's part of what goes to coaches. Look, at some level, receivers got to get open. At some level, DBs have to cover guys. And at some point, you got to get a stop, or you got to get that third down. Some of that's on the players. But at the same time, I really do think that the coaching staff I believe they can learn. I believe they're going to get better. I believe things will change. But to be fair, things have to change between now and next season. 5-week tryout for coaches, 5-week tryout for a lot of the players. I don't know how else to say it right now, because this was one of the worst experiences watching Idaho football. And I thought that last week in the Dome was bad. Really happy I didn't buy tickets to go to this Eastern game, because that 14 points, almost 3 entire quarters between touchdowns against a very not good Eastern team. It's rough. It's disheartening, guys. I don't know what else to say. I do know that, look, I'll be at the Portland State game, and this is one of the things I'm nervous about. And this is part of why I think Idaho's got to get it together and pick up a couple more wins this year, because now at some point, look, we know Idaho's not going to make playoffs, but you're also playing to try to maintain support. You're playing to try to maintain donors. You're playing to try to maintain energy for recruits and transfers who are going to look at this team as a place they can go and shine, or a place they can go and make a difference. And that Portland State game this week, I will be there. I am terrified we're going to have between 3,000 and 4,000 people there. I hope we have more, but the Vandals sit at 2-5. Look, there's not a lot of 2-5 teams that sell out their arena. So that's going to be rough next week. I'll be there, but the reality is that Idaho every year always has to reconvince fans that they're worth going to. And that language might be a little bit harsh, but that's just the reality of having been bad at Idaho for like 28 years. EC was good for 3 years. The entire Pacific Northwest did not learn in three years they did not relearn in 3 years what they had learned in the previous 20 years, which is that Idaho football just culturally is not something that a lot of people immediately think, hey, in the fall, this is what I'm doing. We're not Montana. Idaho's not Montana State. That's just not the reality. They have to reconvince people. And look, the homecoming crowd was pretty good against Northern Colorado, but losing like they did against Northern Colorado, following that up with a loss to Eastern, I am really concerned about the number we're going to have. And I think that also matters eventually for fundraising and further recruiting. So Idaho, I do believe they got to pick up a couple more wins, have to beat Portland State for sure. But at least I really feel to try and salvage what Idaho can this season, you got to try to pick up a win of Sac State or NAU, something like that, or Idaho State. Some of those matchups are terrible, what Idaho can do defensively, but they have to. Now, secondarily, Joshua Wood radically changes things for Idaho. And just, I don't think anyone understood how much he meant to this team. I just really don't. Joshua Wood papered over a lot of areas that Idaho's just not as strong in. I talked about Joshua Wood obviously being the best rusher on the team. Then Rocco Koch was in Wood's absence, but just Idaho has not gotten much out of the running backs. And if they're not getting much out of the running backs, they're still getting touches. They got to get it out of the pass game. That's why when Wood's back, my God, I hope they really lean on Joshua Wood. Let him do what he can, because what Idaho's been doing for the first 7 games of the season, I don't think anyone could possibly say, you know what, we got it, guys, we got it. Things are going okay. Just weather the storm. Idaho's 2-5. We've had multiple games. We talk about how the offense has really made it hard on the defense because of field position, not field goal. Jesus Christ. Because of field position. So yeah, I really think it's back to the draw. It has to be back to the drawing board for what Idaho is doing offensively. Matt Linehan and the Idaho offense to me are far more concerning than what we've seen out of Denison, because I think Denison, there's a pretty simple answer to how things change. For Linehan, he at least does have some tools, and Idaho's not good enough offensively, guys. Absolutely not. Now, I'm not trying to write off, responsibility for the head coach, because Thomas Ford, it's his team. And so ultimately the buck does stop with him. He can make changes. Like this, if there's one guy who can say we're going to change things schematically, he is the one who can do it. So I'm hoping Ford does say, look, Linehan, we got to go back to the drawing board offensively. What Idaho did simplifying defensively, if that generalizes into the future games, then I'd say, what Ford talked about was absolutely right. He learned the right lesson from Northern Colorado. I hope he learned a thing or two about clock management from these last 2 weeks, especially if Joshua was not playing. And I really hope that no one on Idaho right now feels like, hey, we've got things down. The schematics are exactly what they need to be offensively, because I don't know, man. I feel like I'm going in circles right now. Thanks everyone for tuning in. From this point, it's rough, guys. Now, I do think something we all need to do as Vandals collectively. I've talked about it a little bit. This is now a little bit broader, and yeah, I'm still going to go. I started bringing it up and switched. It's sometimes hard doing these by ourselves, guys, but heading into the season, there's a lot of momentum for Idaho based off that time. The PR for Idaho was elite. And the way the way Ford and everyone, including us, was talking about Idaho was, hey, this is a continuation, playoff level team, a lot of returning talent. And that's the only way you should talk about a coach coming into that situation where you're taking over for a successful coach, where it's not, it's not Cody Hawkins taking over for Charlie Ragel and losing a bunch of guys no one wanted, or it's not Ed Lamb taking over at UNC for Ed McCaffrey and losing a bunch of guys no one wanted in the first place. At Idaho, we initially were happy with the amount of guys who stayed here. And the energy of the program was exactly what it had to be, of this is just the next iteration. Things change, but a lot stays the same. Move on. We're going to talk about the Big Sky Conference Championship. We, of course, now know the talent Idaho had this year is not what it was the last few years. Idaho has not capitalized 100% on that talent, but you cannot tell me defensively that this year's team is remotely close to the last few. And you look at the skill position, you look at wide receiver, you cannot tell me that's remotely close to what had been the last few years. And you cannot tell me Idaho's getting as much out of the running backs this year, even with what I think is an objectively better offensive line. I don't think Idaho's getting as much out of the running back position. Quarterback yards have buttressed the Idaho ground game totals a ton. Now, they're still yards, of course, but just a lot of what Idaho thought they were, they're not. And that's a lot. The reason I bring that up is most new coaches do have a little bit of a step back their first year. You want to point to Tim Plow, you want to point to Jeff Vegan as the exceptions, go ahead. That's about it. And Brent Vegan took over in COVID time when all the guys at MSU who were going to leave had already left. And a lot of guys stayed there culturally. It's just different, the Montana schools, guys. It was also, the earlier you took over, the less you have the radical change the transfer portal, NIL stuff have brought. Tim Plow had been a long-time OC, so he was a literal continuity hire. Ford was a sort of continuity hire, not 100%. But I bring all that up to say those are the exceptions. Look at virtually every coaching change that's happened since Idaho came back to the Big Sky. Bobby Hauck, most successful coach in the history of the Big Sky as far as wins, When he came back to Montana in 2018, he was talking return to dominance. By the way, a different language, but kind of in the same vein what Ford and Idaho were doing when he came over. Because if you have talent, that's the only way to talk about your team coming into this next season is how things are going to be good. Bobby Hauck did not make the playoffs in 2018. A lot of Grizz fans were super pissed about that. But you know what? He wrote it out. Obviously, Montana's been humming since 2018. You look at Northern Arizona. I know they did fine on first year with Brian Wright, but that was after 4 failed years of Chris Ball. So look, there was 2 coaching changes before things changed for NAU. Look at Northern Colorado. Ed Lamb was averaging 12 points a game his first 2 years. He turned a corner his 3rd year. You look at Cal Poly. Cal Poly turned no corner whatsoever until a second coaching change post Bo Baldwin with Paul Wolf, and it took multiple years of Paul Wolf. I'm going to quit going through examples, or even look at Mickey Mental taking over. He was a continuity hire as well. Every single team in their first year takes a step back. Now we can talk about, is this a scary step back? Yes. Am I happy about the step back the first year? No. But realistically, the team we thought was a playoff team was just not that good in the first place, and they haven't maximized their talent. You have a not that good team that does not maximize talent, and Idaho losing Josh Wood the way they has is hurt. I think it's hurt Idaho more than any other injury would have hurt any other team in the Big Sky. You put those things together, and that helps explain why Idaho is where they are. What matters is, can we get some improvement growth this year? And then we got that 5-week tryout. What guys are coming back? What coaches are coming back? Crewhead 76 comment section, but it is pathetic how much we have went backwards in San Jose State. Now, Crewhead, here's my pushback there. This was a better effort defensively than we saw against San Jose State. And there's no second quarterback on this team unless Josefek is now going to show something. But we saw, Wagner's had his chance. But the coaching staff gave Rocco Koch his chance today too, that everyone, including myself, wanted Koch to have. Those guys are not the answer at quarterback. And if you have no answer at quarterback and you're not getting anything out of the running back room for the most part, especially once you lose Art, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? When Josh Wood comes back, I just hope this is a completely Joshua Wood-centric team, Crewhead, because I'm with you. This is a huge step back, but there's some things that explain the huge step back. Joshua Wood and Art Williams were monumental to this team. I don't think any of us understood what the lack of depth was for this team, where losing Joshua Wood meant, that offense, whatever they were hoping it was, it's out the window. And then losing Art Williams, whatever you're hoping to get out of the running back room, you're not getting it. So what do you do? What are you supposed to do at this point, man? You gotta come up with something different. But look, I think Idaho without Joshua Wood might have win a single. They might have, if Joshua Wood did not come to Idaho and it was Jack Wagner starting, this team maybe wins 1 game the entire year. That's how much I believe Joshua Wood means to this team. So when he's back, I think Idaho can go back to being competitive and maybe picking up a couple wins. But I think we just have to ride this out and hope Joshua Wood comes back, Crewhead. I don't know what else to say. With the other part of offensively, we got to get more out of Idaho. Absolutely get more. We need Joshua Wood back, but Linehan's got to go back to the drawing board. I feel like Ford's got to go back to the drawing board too. From this point on, the question is, what type of growth can we get? I have got to call it a night, guys. Thanks for supporting the show. Thanks for coming here. For everyone who hung out with me, it's almost 1 o'clock. Said I thought it was important to get this one out here instead of waiting until Thursday. This is the only way I could do it. So, hey, Crewhead 76 again, agreed, but we wait till 6 minutes left to use Josefek. JW and Art was a huge loss. Well, Crewhead, I talked about that earlier. I think your best evidence right now is, hey, we can, just because you're frustrated with how Idaho is, just because you think there's been some coaching mistakes, it doesn't mean every decision has been a coaching mistake, Crewhead. We learned today that the reason that Koch was not getting the touches maybe we thought he should get is because whenever teams started to make him have to pass, the jig's up. He can't pass. So that's why against UNC, he was getting the limited run he was, as there needed to be a little bit of mystery about, can he pass or not? Is there a little unpredictability about when he's in the game or not? So my belief here is that Joseph had to not be shown something in practice, because at the end of spring, he was clearly above Wagner, and then he was clearly below Wagner now. So look, competition takes place. People move their spots, but I'm with you. I wish Joseph had been the guy, but from where we're at, my only evidence I can presume is that they waited so long to go to Joseph because between the spring and now, Joseph just hadn't been shown enough in practice to be a guy who was there. I agree, Crewhead, that I thought that Joseph was better last season, but at the same time, the coaches aren't playing guys based off of last season. They're playing guys based off of what they've seen. And there's just no way you can possibly interpret, even with how Wagner had played not well in the time he played prior, that if he was picked as a starter when with Teeny and Wood out, it's because he'd earned the spot, meaning someone wasn't standing out. Sometimes people win based off attrition. My hope is that if Wagner's not in, if Wood's not in, we do go with Joseph, and that looks like the brain dead thing. But I think the real thing we got to hope for, Idaho is going to be a very bad football team until Joshua Wood gets back. We need Joshua to get back. That can stabilize a lot. And then maybe we can go back to saying like, hey, let's see how we can salvage the season. But right now, Idaho is scaring no one offensively. If you can't pass against Eastern, you cannot pass against anyone. Thanks for supporting the show, guys. You got to give Ford time, but we also will need to see things change between now and the end of this year, and we're going to need to see some things change for next year. So I'm not trying to dismiss that completely, because I've been open. I really like Thomas Ford. I really want this to work. I wanted him to be here. I think things can get better, but things have to change. That's clear. But at the same time, just like Pribble, the guy does need time. We can be upset about the losses. I'm with you on being upset about the losses, but if we want Vandal football to be fun, we need to root for Thomas Ford right now. We need to root that he goes to the drawing board and figures out some things. Maybe we need to hope that he gets a hold of some of his mentors and he puts together some stuff that he hadn't been putting together before. I don't know the answer, but I know Thomas Ford's going to be here for a while. So if you're a Vandal, you need to hope things work out well for Thomas Ford. You need to hope the guy we saw as a special teams coordinator, we can see more of that happen. What we hoped we would see when we'd seen him as a special teams coordinator previously, we need to hope that's a little bit more of what we see, guys. Because Ford's going to be here for a while, for sure. If we want this to be fun, we need Ford to improve. I'm rooting for him. I believe in him, but that also means we got to see things change. Same thing's Pribble, though. You got to give coach some time. Yeah, sorry. I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's where we're at. Thanks for supporting the show. Thanks for being here tonight. Go Vandals. I will see you guys probably on Thursday. I don't think I'm going to be able to do the Sunday show today, this week. So until next time, go Vandals.